What if I told you that the darkest night in the wild prairie was never truly deserted and silent? Imagine a world where creatures capable of killing you with a single swipe of their paw roam outside the thin walls of your home, yet you close your eyes peacefully. European pioneers finding themselves on the Great Plains often could not sleep from fear, hearing the howling of wolves and the heavy breathing of grizzly bears right outside their tents. But for the indigenous peoples of America, this frightening soundscape was a familiar lullaby in which they could distinguish the slightest notes of danger. Their sleep was not a disconnection from reality, but a special state of alert calm, inaccessible to modern man. They did not build stone walls and iron fences, but created invisible barriers that predators were afraid to cross. Watch the video to the end to learn how Native Americans used smells, camp geometry, and even the predators themselves to make their nighttime lodgings the safest place on Earth. Are you ready to learn the truth that fear of the dark is just a habit that can be unlearned? For the Native Americans of the Great Plains, night was never a time of complete helplessness, as it was perceived in the culture of white settlers. From an early age, they were taught to perceive the world around them not as a hostile environment, but as a system of signs and warnings. A predator, whether a wolf or a cougar, was seen not as a mystical monster, but as an equal rival with understandable habits. Understanding the logic of the beast gave a person a confidence that could not be gained with weapons alone. This psychological barrier was the first and most important level of defense for the sleeping camp. A warrior went to sleep with the firm knowledge that he would hear danger approaching long before it became fatal. His hearing was tuned to filter out the familiar sounds of nature, such as the noise of the wind or the chirping of insects. Any disturbance in this background, such as crickets suddenly falling silent, acted as an alarm signal. The sleeper's brain continued to process information, remaining in passive scanning mode. This ability to sleep lightly was not an innate gift, but the result of years of training. Hunters often slept in short bursts, waking up at the slightest change in temperature or wind direction. They knew how to control the depth of their sleep, not allowing themselves to fall into complete oblivion in dangerous places. This state can be compared to how a wild animal sleeps, ready to go from rest to active defense in a fraction of a second. The Indians believed that a person does not lose contact with guardian spirits in their sleep, who can warn them of danger. These beliefs were reinforced by real observation skills and knowledge of animal behavior. For example, they knew that a well-fed bear would rarely attack a camp unless provoked by the smell of food. Wolves, as a rule, avoided places where they sensed a strong human presence, preferring easier prey. The absence of panic-stricken fear of nature allowed Native Americans to make rational decisions when choosing a place to spend the night. They did not hide in secluded burrows where they could be trapped, but chose open, visible spaces. Confidence in their abilities and knowledge of the terrain replaced fortified walls. The calmness of the leaders was transmitted to all members of the tribe, creating an atmosphere of security. An important aspect was collective responsibility for safety, where everyone felt the support of their neighbors. Even in their sleep, people remained part of a single organism, reacting to external stimuli in unison. If one warrior woke up and grabbed his weapon, the others followed his example almost instantly without asking questions. This mental connection was stronger than any physical barrier. The philosophy of survival was based on the principle of coexisting with danger, rather than attempting to destroy it completely. The Indians did not try to exterminate all the wolves in the area in order to sleep peacefully. They learned to live in such a way that their paths crossed with predators only on their terms. This required the deepest respect for the power of the beast and the absence of arrogance. In the Lakota and Cheyenne cultures, there were special rituals before bedtime that set the mind in the right frame. These could be short prayers or simply a mental appeal to the forces of nature for protection. Such mental programming helped to reduce anxiety and restore strength, even in a short time. Sleep became not just a physiological need, but part of a warrior's spiritual practice. We would be very interested to hear your point of view. Do you think modern people are capable of developing the same sense of unity with nature? Or have we lost this ability forever? Write about it in the comments and be sure to subscribe to our channel. Want to know a secret that will change your perception of the safety of a simple tent camp? The structure of an Indian camp on the plains was never chaotic or random, as it might have seemed to an outside observer. The teepees were always arranged in a circle, which had deep sacred and practical significance for defense. This circle, called a hoop, created an enclosed space within which the most valuable part of the tribe was located. The entrance to each dwelling faced east toward the rising sun, which also created a unified surveillance system. The most valuable horses were herded into the center of this circle at night to protect them from horse thieves and predators. The presence of the herd inside the living perimeter served as an excellent alarm system for sleeping people. Horses have much keener hearing and sense of smell than humans, and are the first to react to the approach of a wolf or bear. Their restlessness, snorting, and stamping of hooves instantly woke their owners, warning them of uninvited guests. The tents themselves were placed close enough together that it was impossible to pass between them unnoticed. The ropes used to secure the tent covers created a complex web of tension lines around the perimeter. In the dark, any large animal or enemy would inevitably touch these obstacles, creating noise and vibration. It was a simple but effective early warning system that worked without human intervention. The entrances to the camp were often blocked at night with bushes or poles, creating narrow passages. This forced anyone who wanted to get in or out to move along a predictable path. It was easier for the guards to control a few specific points than the entire perimeter of the open steppe. This arrangement minimized the risk of a sudden attack by a pack of wolves. The location of the chiefs and most experienced warriors' teepees also followed the defense strategy. Their dwellings were often placed closer to the exits or on the side from which a threat was most likely to appear. This created a living shield for women and the elderly, whose teepees were located in more protected sectors of the circle. Thus, any predator that dared to approach would first encounter an armed and experienced opponent. The acoustics of the circular camp worked as a natural sound amplifier, allowing everything happening in the center to be heard. The sound of footsteps or a cry in one part of the circle easily spread around the entire perimeter. This made it possible to raise the alarm instantly and coordinate actions even in complete darkness. The circular shape left no blind spots where sound could be lost. The outer perimeter of the camp was often cleared of tall grass and shrubs to deprive predators of cover. The open space around the teepee, lit by the moon or stars, made it virtually impossible to approach unnoticed. Wolves or pumas, unable to sneak up close, most often gave up their attack. Sometimes, in particularly dangerous areas, the camp was surrounded by a temporary fence made of thorny acacia or juniper branches. Such a barrier was insurmountable for most animals, unwilling to injure their paws on the thorns. It was a prototype of barbed wire created from readily available natural materials. Circular defense was effective not only against animals but also against hostile tribes. However, it was against nocturnal predators that it worked flawlessly for centuries, saving the lives of people and livestock. This spatial organization scheme was refined over generations and proved its effectiveness in the harshest conditions. Such thoughtful geometry transformed light leather tents into a veritable fortress in the middle of the endless plain. Interestingly, did you know that the location of tents can be as important a factor for survival as the availability of weapons? In the next chapter, you will learn how Native Americans used the invisible weapon of scent. What if I showed you a way to become invisible to the sharpest nose in the wild? Predators' sense of smell is hundreds of times stronger than that of humans, and it is often the smell that gives away the presence of humans or food. Native Americans understood this well and developed a whole system of odor control to avoid attracting the attention of bears and wolves. The first and most important rule was to never store fresh meat or strong-smelling food inside a teepee. Food supplies, especially dried meat, pemmican, were carefully packed in rawhide bags called parfleche. These containers made of stiff bison hide were tightly closed and hung high in trees or on special poles outside the living area. This method of storage made food inaccessible to ground predators and carried the tempting aromas away on the wind. Above their noses, a bear could smell the food, but could not pinpoint its source within the camp. To mask their own scent, the Indians often used smoke from fires to which they added fragrant herbs. When burned, wormwood, sage, and prairie grass gave off a thick aroma that overpowered the smell of human bodies and sweat. Clothing and leather teepees were impregnated with this smoke, becoming part of the natural background of the steppe. For animals, this smell was associated more with fire or dry grass than with prey. Hunters returning with prey never entered the camp covered in animal blood. The carcasses were cut up at a considerable distance from the camp, so as not to leave a bloody trail leading to the people. Clothes soaked in the smell of blood were either thoroughly washed or left outside the teepee. This rule was strictly observed, as the smell of blood could drive a grizzly bear into a frenzy from many kilometers away. Women used mixtures of fat and herbs to treat the skin, which also changed the olfactory profile of the camp. The specific smell of tanned leather and smoke was unpleasant to many wild animals, which prefer natural scents. This created a kind of invisible dome that scared away cautious predators unaccustomed to such strong smells. Special attention was paid to the disposal of food waste and bones after meals. They were never simply thrown behind the teepee, but collected and carried far away, downwind, or burned to ashes. The ashes effectively absorbed any residual odors, leaving no bait for scavengers and predators. Cleanliness in the camp was a matter of life and death, not just aesthetics. Some tribes used the urine of predators, such as wolves, to mark the perimeter of the camp. This created the illusion that the territory was already occupied by a large pack and scared away lone animals and competitors. This biological barrier was known to experienced trackers and was actively used in solo expeditions. There was also a practice of rubbing certain plants on the body before bed to mask one's natural scent. This helped not only against predators, but also against annoying insects that could disturb a sensitive sleep. A mixture of bear fat and herbs served as both a protective cream against the cold and a disguise. The ability to control odors allowed the Indians to literally dissolve into the landscape, becoming olfactory ghosts. For a bear, a camp devoid of the smell of food and waste became simply an uninteresting object in the landscape. This required strict discipline from every member of the tribe, young and old alike. This complex chemistry of survival was as important a part of the culture as hunting or warfare. Don't forget to like this if you are surprised by such thoughtfulness in the everyday details of ancient peoples. Are you ready to learn the shocking truth about what night camps in dangerous wild lands really look like? Contrary to popular westerns and adventure films, Native Americans rarely built huge pioneer campfires, whose flames shot up to the sky and lit up everything for miles around. Such carelessness was characteristic only of inexperienced white travelers, and it often cost them their lives. A huge roaring fire instantly blinds those sitting in its circle of light, constricting their pupils and depriving them of the ability to see what is happening in the darkness. The darkness beyond the illuminated circle turns into a dense, impenetrable wall from which an arrow can fly or a predator can jump at any moment. A person sitting by a large fire becomes an ideal and helpless target, visible from afar, while he himself is blind. Instead, the indigenous peoples of the prairies used small, carefully controlled fires that provided the heat necessary for survival, but produced a minimum of treacherous light. Such concealed fires were often built in special depressions in the ground, and this technology is known today to survivalists as a Dakota fire. To do this, two connected pits were dug, one for the fire itself and the other for air intake, creating natural draft. The walls of the pit reliably hid the flames from prying eyes, acting as a lampshade directed toward the ground. In addition to camouflage, this design perfectly protected the fire from strong steppe winds, preventing sparks from flying and setting dry grass on fire. Such a hidden underground fire allowed warriors to warm themselves and even cook hot food, while remaining completely unnoticed by enemies and wild animals, even from a short distance. The heat from such a hearth rose straight up, warming the people huddled around it, while the light was completely absorbed by the earthen walls of the pit. Fuel for night fires was selected with particular, almost fanatical care to avoid the two main enemies of camouflage: excessive smoke and loud crackling. In treeless plains, dry dung, i.e., bison manure dried in the sun to the consistency of stone, was most often used. It burned evenly, gave off a lot of heat, and produced almost no smoke, with a specific but not pungent smell of grass. Inside the dwelling, a traditional teepee, The hearth was always located geometrically exactly in the center, directly under the smoke valve at the top of the cone. The design of the valves allowed the draft to be adjusted so that the smoke escaped and the heat remained below. The thick bison hides from which the teepees were sewn hardly let any light through. From the outside, such a sleeping camp did not look like a cluster of bright, festive lights, but rather like a group of faint, barely noticeable cones glowing in the darkness. This soft, ghostly glow was enough to scare away small animals, but did not attract undue attention from enemy scouts on distant hills. The camp seemed to dissolve into the twilight. Sometimes in particularly dangerous areas, several small false fires would be lit around the perimeter of the camp. This was done to create the illusion that there were far more people present than there actually were. Cunning and deception were part of military survival strategy. Predators such as wolves or cougars, seeing this ring of fire, instinctively feared crossing this forbidden border of light. For any wild animal, fire is a supernatural force that cannot be fought with fangs and claws, so they bypassed the camp. If it was necessary to urgently illuminate the area during a night alarm or suspicious noise, the tactic was changed instantly. A bunch of dry grass or a piece of fat was thrown into the smoldering fire, creating a powerful but short-lived flash of light. This allowed them to brightly illuminate the perimeter for a split second and see a sneaking enemy or beast in order to take an aim shot. But immediately after that, the fire was muffled and trampled again to restore the defender's ability to see in the dark. Light discipline was restored instantly. The ability to handle fire also included the critically important skill of quickly and completely extinguishing it in case of an emergency evacuation. The fire was not doused with water, which was in short supply, but simply covered with earth and tightly packed down. This was done so as not to leave any traces of their presence or smoldering embers, which the enemy could use to determine the time of the detachment's departure. The so-called cold overnight stay without fire at all was also practiced if the risk of detection was too great. People slept huddled together under skins, warming each other with the heat of their bodies. In the harsh winter, fire was the only salvation from death and freezing, and its preservation became a sacred duty of every member of the tribe. Losing the fire in a blizzard meant destroying the whole family, so the coals were watched over like children. But even then, in the bitter cold, the flames were kept under strict and vigilant control, not allowing them to become the uncontrolled master of the situation. For the Indians, fire was a tool, a faithful servant and protector, but never a source of exposure or fire. For centuries, Native Americans masterfully balanced the fine line between the physiological need for warmth and the tactical necessity of remaining invisible ghosts of the prairie. This required a high level of discipline and knowledge that was passed down from generation to generation. How difficult do you think it was to maintain such a strict light masking regime every night, especially when fatigue was overwhelming? In the next chapter, you will learn about people who never slept so that other members of the tribe could sleep peacefully. The Great Plains tribes had special military communities that were responsible for maintaining order. These people were often called the camp police, or, in the case of the Cheyenne, the dog soldiers. Their role during night stops was key to ensuring the safety of the entire tribe. They took up their posts when the others went to sleep, forming a living chain of guards. The sentries did not stand still like guards in European armies, but constantly moved around the perimeter. Their movements were silent and smooth, and they often stopped to listen to the night. They knew every bush and rock around the camp and noticed any changes in the landscape. Their task was not to engage in combat, but to warn the sleepers in time. A complex system of sound signals imitating the voices of nature was used for communication at night. The cry of an owl, the howl of a coyote, or the chirping of a cricket could carry encrypted information about the approach of an enemy or an animal. These sounds did not arouse suspicion in outsiders, but were understood by every member of the tribe. Such a natural radio allowed them to coordinate their actions without a single word of human speech. Particular attention was paid to the behavior of camp dogs, which were faithful assistants to the sentries. The dogs that lived with the Indians were semi-wild and retained their wolf instincts. If a dog began to growl in a certain direction, the warrior knew that there was a threat lurking there. However, the dogs were taught not to bark unnecessarily so as not to expose the camp with unnecessary noise. The changing of the guard took place quietly and unobtrusively so as not to create commotion and wake those who were resting. Usually, the night was divided into several watches, determined by the position of the stars in the sky. Each warrior knew his time and place, and discipline in such matters was ironclad. Falling asleep on duty was punished severely, up to and including expulsion or public humiliation. Young warriors often used night watches as an opportunity to prove themselves and earn the respect of their elders. It was a school of survival where the skills of a tracker and observer were honed. Experienced mentors tested the vigilance of newcomers by trying to sneak up on the camp unnoticed. In case of real danger, the sentry had to instantly assess the situation and make a decision. Wake up the camp or try to drive the beast away on his own. Often, a thrown stone or a quiet whistle was enough for the wolf to realize that it had been spotted and leave. They tried not to provoke the bear, but only watched its route, ready to defend themselves. The night guard's weapons were always ready for battle. A bow with an arrow nocked, or, in later times, a loaded rifle. But the main weapons remained the eyes and ears, capable of piercing the darkness. They were the first line of defense, a living wall between the world of dreams and the harsh reality of the steppe. Even in peacetime and on their own territory, the practice of night patrols did not cease. It became a habit, part of the nomadic way of life. The safety of the tribe depended on how tightly the circle of guards was closed. These invisible guards allowed women, children, and the elderly to sleep peacefully, knowing that their peace was protected. Their vigilance determined whether the tribe would see the next morning. What if I told you that the earth itself could be the best defense against fangs and claws? Choosing a place to camp was a science in itself, taking into account dozens of natural factors. Indians never set up camp in random places. They sought out natural fortifications created by the terrain. River bends, high cliffs, and thick thickets of thorny bushes were used as walls that did not need to be built. The river often served as a natural barrier on one or even three sides if the camp was set up in a bend in the river. Water not only provided drinking water, but also created a sound barrier for predators who did not like to swim across turbulent streams at night. In addition, the sound of water masked the sounds of camp life, making it less noticeable to the ear. However, care had to be taken to ensure that the sound of water did not drown out the approach of an enemy. The Iroquois and other forest tribes took advantage of the dense undergrowth to set up camps in inaccessible areas. They would deliberately fell several trees or weave bushes together to block the approaches to the camp. Such barriers forced large animals such as bears and moose to bypass the camp. Even the strongest animals disliked pushing through windbreaks at night. On the plains, they often chose hills or plateaus with good visibility in all directions. This prevented predators from sneaking up unnoticed, using the folds of the terrain. The wind on the hill also carried the smells of the camp away and prevented them from accumulating in the lowlands. In addition, there were fewer annoying insects on the hills. In winter, the tactic changed. Camps were moved to deep river valleys, protected from the biting winds by high banks. Here among the trees, there was more fuel and natural protection from blizzards. The deep snow around the camp itself became an obstacle for wolves, which found it difficult to move on the loose snow. The trails around the camp were trampled by people, and a step to the side meant falling into a snowdrift. Caves and rock shelters were used less often because of the risk of being trapped, but sometimes they were used. The main rule was to have an emergency exit or the ability to defend a narrow entrance with few people. The rock behind them provided a sense of security and warmth, reflecting the heat of the fire. Natural features, such as the direction of prevailing winds, were also taken into account when setting up camp. The entrance to the teepee was always positioned so that the wind would not blow smoke inside or carry snow in. This also helped to control the spread of odors in the direction of possible predators. Thickets of rose hips or hawthorn could serve as an excellent outer ring of defense for a temporary camp. Even a bear with its thick skin would prefer to go around thorny bushes rather than fight its way through them. Nature itself provided the materials for building defensive structures. Experienced trackers could read the landscape like an open book, seeing a potential threat or protection in every hill and ravine. They knew where the animal trails ran and never set up camp directly in the path of animal migration. This was a basic respect for the roads of the wild. The ability to blend their dwellings into the environment made Indian camps an organic part of the landscape. In the next chapter, you will learn what was inside a teepee and how life was organized at arm's length from the wilderness. The interior of the teepee was organized with extreme, almost mathematical rationality and served as the last and most reliable line of defense for a sleeping person from the outside world. The very structure of this amazing dwelling, which was a perfect cone made of long wooden poles covered with sewn bison hides, was ingeniously designed. It was surprisingly strong and resistant to wind loads, as the conical shape allowed the hurricane-force winds of the Great Plains to simply flow around the dwelling without overturning it. Bison hide, carefully treated with thick smoke and impregnated with fat, became waterproof and thick enough to withstand the claws of small predators or the accidental glancing blow of an enemy's knife. The entrance, which was always located on the east side, was closed with a thick leather flap, which was often tied from the inside with a complex system of knots at night. This turned the tent into a small fortress that was impossible to enter silently. The sleeping places inside were located strictly along the perimeter of the circle, with people always sleeping with their feet toward the center, where the sacred hearth smoldered. This arrangement was dictated by centuries-old wisdom. It allowed people to keep their heads as far away as possible from the drafts of the entrance, and at the same time closer to the supplies and personal weapons stored on the sloping walls. People woke up facing the fire, seeing the entire space of the dwelling. The ground inside the teepee was never left bare. It was covered with a thick layer of specially tanned bison or bear skins, creating powerful insulation from the cold and dampness of the soil. The thick winter fur was not only a very warm mattress, but also served as an excellent hygienic bedding, which, thanks to special treatment, was practically free of insects and parasites. Instead of soft down pillows, hard leather bags, or even saddles were often placed under the head, which had a dual purpose. This allowed the most valuable personal belongings and amulets to be kept literally under the head, under constant physical control, even during sleep. In the event of a sudden nighttime alarm, a warrior could instantly grab everything of value and necessity without wasting a second searching in the dark. Weapons, a combat bow, quiver with arrows, hunting knife, or in later times a rifle, were always close at hand, often at the head of the bed or hung on a pole above the head. The reflex to grab the hilt of a weapon at any suspicious sound upon awakening was developed in boys from early childhood and remained with them into old age. During the harsh winter months, an additional inner curtain called a dew cloth or dew curtain was stretched across the entire perimeter of the teepee. This curtain, often decorated with patterns, created a protective air layer between the icy outer wall and the warm living space. It worked like a thermos, significantly improving insulation and creating a draft that carried smoke upward. The same canopy reliably protected sleeping people from unpleasant drafts blowing from below and from cold condensation dripping from above from cooling poles. Household items and supplies could be stored behind this canopy, freeing up precious space in the center of the dwelling for family life. It was a storage space hidden from view. Women and small children traditionally slept in the back of the teepee, away from the entrance under the physical protection of the men who occupied places closer to the exit. This strict distribution of sleeping places was dictated by harsh security considerations in case of a sudden nighttime enemy invasion. The man had to be the first to meet the threat, giving the family a chance to escape. Infants were placed in special hard cradles at night, which could be grabbed in a second and carried away on the back. Sometimes they were hung on a pole so that the mother could rock the baby without getting out of bed. Mobility, even in sleep, was the key to the survival of the tribe. Night lighting inside the dwelling was maintained by a dim, economical hearth fire, which provided enough light to distinguish silhouettes but did not blind the eyes. Shadows from the fire danced on the sloping walls, creating a cozy and mystical atmosphere where legends were told. However, any sound from outside, even the quietest, caused everyone to freeze instantly and listen. The tightly stretched leather walls of the teepee acted like a giant drum membrane, transmitting the slightest vibrations and sounds of footsteps from outside to inside. The walls did not protect against sound. They amplified it, alerting the inhabitants. On particularly cold winter nights, beloved dogs were allowed into the teepee, where they slept at the entrance or directly between people under the skins. The dogs served not only as living heaters, giving their warmth to their owners, but also as a reliable alarm system inside the dwelling. No stranger could approach unnoticed. If a dog suddenly jumped up and began to growl hoarsely, looking at the tied entrance, it meant real and imminent danger requiring an immediate response. Close proximity to animals was not just the norm, but a harsh necessity for survival in the wild. Ventilation of the complex space was regulated by two smoke valves at the very top of the cone, which were controlled from the outside with long poles, turning them with the wind. Correct and subtle adjustment of the draft made it possible to completely avoid smoke in the room, keeping the air clean and breathable even when the hearth was burning. Invisible carbon monoxide was a terrible enemy, which the Indians knew well and feared no less than packs of wolves. The art of smoke control was a mandatory skill for any housewife, as the health of the family depended on it. Every single thing in the teepee, even the smallest, had its own strictly defined place, established over centuries. This was necessary so that in complete darkness or smoke, any object could be found by touch without error. Chaos and disorder in a confined space could cost lives in a critical situation, such as an attack or fire. This ideal order was maintained strictly and rigorously by the senior mistress of the dwelling. The teepee was not just a tent made of skins, but a complex engineering structure that provided maximum comfort and safety for nomadic life. It was a real home which, nevertheless, could be taken down in just half an hour, loaded onto a sled, and carried away to new lands. Winter on the Great Plains and in the subarctic forests was a severe test that required special skills for overnight stays. Northern peoples, such as the Cree and Athabascans, taught their southern neighbors to use snow as insulation. In severe cold, when temperatures dropped to extreme levels, sleeping in a regular teepee could be deadly without preparation. Snow was piled up against the bottom edge of the teepee on the outside, creating an additional insulating barrier that protected against the wind. Lone hunters or small groups caught in a blizzard far from camp built snow shelters similar to quinzees. These were piles of snow that were packed down and then hollowed out from the inside. The thick snow walls perfectly retained the heat of the human body in a small candle or tallow lamp. Inside such a den, the temperature could be around zero, even if it was 40 degrees below zero outside. The main enemy of those who slept during the winter was not predators, but hypothermia, a slow death from cold. Therefore, they often slept in groups, huddled close together to share warmth. Fur blankets made from bison hides with thick winter undercoats were the best sleeping bags invented by nature. The wool-formed air pockets that trapped warm air close to the body. Shoes, moccasins, were taken off at night and placed under the body or in a sleeping bag to prevent them from freezing and becoming stiff by morning. Wearing icy shoes meant risking frostbite in the feet during the first hours of the journey. The moccasins were stuffed with dry grass or moss, which served as excellent insulation and absorbed moisture. The fire in winter required constant attention, and often a special person was assigned to stay up all night and add wood to it. If there was not enough wood, stones heated in the fire were used. They were wrapped in leather and placed at the feet of those sleeping, which worked as a powerful heating pad for several hours. In the northern forests, temporary shelters were built from spruce branches, laying them in a thick layer on the snow. This created an insulating cushion that prevented the body from melting the snow beneath it and getting wet. A canopy was made on top to reflect the heat of the fire, nodya, onto the sleeping person. A nodya is a special fire made of 2 or 3 long logs that burns evenly throughout the night. Predators became bolder and more aggressive in winter due to hunger, so safety measures were doubled. Wolves often followed hunters, hoping to feed on the remains of their prey or the hunters themselves. The winter camp was more compact to make it easier to defend the perimeter. Eating before bedtime in winter was critically important. It was necessary to eat a lot of fatty foods. Fat gave the body energy to generate heat during the long night. A hungry person freezes much faster, and their sleep is restless and intermittent. Clothing was layered, but they tried to sleep with their belts and ties loosened so as not to restrict blood circulation. Frozen blood does not warm the limbs, and the risk of frostbite increases. The Indians knew the physiology of their bodies very well. Winter camping was an art of balancing heat retention and readiness for action. The experience of survival in the snow was passed down from generation to generation as the greatest value. A warrior's sleep was never completely unarmed. Means of defense always remained within immediate reach. Even in deep sleep, an Indian's hand instinctively sought the handle of a knife or the shaft of a spear at any suspicious sound. The knife was the most versatile tool and the weapon of last resort when attacked by an animal in a confined space. It was carried in a sheath around the neck or on the belt, never removed even during sleep. Firearms, which appeared later, were also stored with special precautions. Guns were placed on special stands or hung on teepee poles so that they did not touch the damp ground. Gunpowder and capsules were protected from moisture more than anything else, often stored in airtight horns or flasks close to the body. Wet gunpowder rendered even the most formidable weapon useless. Bows and arrows required no less care. The bowstring was often removed or loosened at night so that it would not stretch and lose its elasticity. The quiver with arrows was positioned so that an arrow could be grabbed with one movement, without looking. The arrowheads were razor sharp and could inflict a fatal wound even on a large predator. Tomahawks and war clubs lay at the head of the bed, ready to smash the skull of a wolf or enemy who broke into the teepee. These were weapons for close combat, effective in the dark and in confined spaces, where a long gun or bow would be useless. The heavy stone or iron head of the club was a formidable weapon in hand-to-hand combat. Spears with wide tips were sometimes used to protect against bears. Such a spear was stuck into the ground next to the sleeping place at an angle, creating an improvised barrier. If a beast rushed at a sleeping person, it could run into the tip with its own chest. Warriors knew that in night combat, speed of reaction and decisiveness were more important than accuracy. Therefore, training included exercises in quick awakening and bringing weapons to combat readiness. A second's delay could cost a life. Shields made of thick bison hide, specially treated with steam, were hung at the entrance or at the head. Such a shield could stop an arrow and even soften the blow of a bear's paw. It was not only physical but also magical protection, decorated with sacred symbols. Sometimes traps and signaling devices were used around the sleeping place of a lone traveler. Tensioned wires with bone rattles tied to them could warn of the approach of a guest. It was a simple but effective alarm system. A weapon was an extension of a warrior's arm, a part of his being that he never parted with for a moment. The attitude towards it was almost religious, because life depended on its condition. Even when falling asleep, the Indian remained armed and a dangerous opponent to anyone who dared to disturb his peace. This readiness for battle was the basis for peaceful sleep. The nighttime lodging of a lone scout or hunter, cut off from the protection of his tribe, was a special art. Here, alone with the wilderness, completely different rules of survival came into force. A lone scout could not count on sentries or dogs. He had to become invisible. Often such people slept in trees, building platforms in branches that were inaccessible to wolves and bears. The wooden platform provided safety, but required the ability to sleep without turning over, so as not to fall from a height. The hunter tied himself to the trunk with a leather strap to prevent himself from falling in his sleep. The height provided an excellent view, and the smell of humans was carried away by the wind, not reaching the noses of predators below. Sometimes they used the foxhole tactic, digging a narrow depression in the ground and camouflaging it with branches and turf. In such a hole, a person was hidden from view and protected from the wind, and body heat was retained in the enclosed space. It was like a grave, but it saved lives in the cold steppe. Loners tried not to light fires, eating dry rations, pemmican and water. Fire was too conspicuous a beacon, attracting unnecessary attention. If a fire was necessary, it was made tiny and extinguished long before nightfall, changing the place of rest for several kilometers. Sleep was light and intermittent. 15-20 minutes of sleep were followed by minutes of listening to the night. This regime allowed the brain to rest, but not to lose control of the situation. The body adapted to this rhythm within a few days of the hike. The natural terrain was used for protection, with their backs to a rock or thick bushes and their faces toward open space. It was essential to prevent anyone from approaching unnoticed from behind. The hunter always left himself a way to retreat. The water drunk before bed served as an alarm clock. Physiological needs forced him to wake up after a few hours, preventing him from falling into too deep a sleep. It was a simple and reliable method of self-control. Loneliness in the steppe required iron endurance and complete fusion with nature. A person ceased to be a foreign element and became part of the ecosystem, as much a predator as those he feared. Fear was transformed into extreme concentration. Returning to camp after such a trip felt like returning to another world, full of noise and safety. But it was this experience of solitude that made a warrior a true master of survival. We see that the nightlife of Native Americans was permeated with a deep understanding of the laws of nature and animal psychology. Their safety was based not on thick walls, but on knowledge, discipline, and respect for the surrounding world. Sleeping among wolves and bears was possible thanks to a complex system that included everything from the geometry of the camp to odor control. They did not fight nature, but used its features for their protection. This survival skill, honed over centuries, is still admired today. Which of these techniques did you find most ingenious? Write your opinion in the comments and subscribe to the channel to learn more secrets of ancient people's survival.